Those who dream about the future create the future. To paraphrase a quote often attributed to Abraham Lincoln. In a world defined by immediacy, it can be difficult to find the time to dream about the future. Come join us as we take the time to dream with purpose. This is the Full-Time Dreamer Project. Welcome to the Full-Time Dreamer Project, where we explore what it's like to get out of the immediate and dream with a purpose, to be more present. We will put aside immediacy and spend time in the future rather than the present. We will dive into what gives us hope beyond the current, and we will create a path towards enacting positive change. I'm your host, Michael Volania. I'm a futurist, humorist, and recovering management consultant who loves to spend his days daydreaming, albeit with a purpose. My love of dreaming and connecting seemingly unrelated ideas will guide us as we explore dreaming with a purpose. And believe me, those ideas can be head scratchers, even for me. But that's the point. Take this podcast, for example. Have you ever done something not knowing what it was called? Only what it meant to you and for others? After a while, did you start to give it a name that has been ringing in your head for so long that it prepared you for a journey you couldn't fully understand, but you just took it anyway? That, in a nutshell, is how I came to start this podcast and futures experiment called the Full-Time Dreamer Project. I knew I needed to do this, had a notion, or several notions, of where it could go, and had to take the first steps to get there. So here we are at this first podcast. First, I'm going to introduce the Full-Time Dreamer Project, my thesis for it, and the concepts of futures thinking. We'll meander to what dreaming with a purpose is and is not, why dreaming with purpose is so important, and how we can and should dream with purpose. Future episodes will explore all of these ideas even further. So sit back, relax. You're about to take a journey to becoming a full-time dreamer. You may be asking, what is the Full-Time Dreamer Project? The Full-Time Dreamer Project is a futures experiment designed for dreaming with purpose. What is dreaming with purpose? What do you mean by futures? Well, dreaming with purpose is to dream beyond the present in a time where doing so is at a premium. Futures we'll get to shortly, but first, let's get to the thesis for this project. This whole experiment hinges on my thesis, my mission and vision, if you will. To be more present, you have to spend more time in the future. Well, what the heck does that look like, and what do I mean by that? How can I be present and in the future? Don't worry, we'll get there. Through a combination of conversations, research, and tools, over the course of this first podcast series, we will unpack what it means to spend more time in the future, why we need to do it, how we do it, how it relates to our present, and what we can do about it now. And what does it mean to spend more time in the future? Glad you asked. It means to get more motivated and creative in the potential of the future to be more capable and active to create that future today. Wait, what is the future then? Some may call it futures thinking, futurism, strategic foresight, or any number of other definitions. Futures or future studies is defined by Wikipedia as the study of postulating possible, probable, and preferable futures, and the worldviews and myths that underlie them. I was quoted by the World Future Society on the futurist mindset. To me, a futurist mindset is to be the dreamer of dreams for the world, whether it is the solver of problems futurist or the philosophical, abstract futurist. The core of each is a belief that there is a great potential within every one of us and everything. This does not always mean a naive utopian outcome. Rather, it requires a firm understanding that everyone's and everything's max potential is not always available, including our own. It is our futurist duty to act as stewards of dreams, guiding the maximization of the potential we see. All of these definitions employ a combination of theories, tools, and techniques for thinking about the future. The Institute for the Future defines the future as 10 years from the present, and I prefer to use that time frame as well. It's far enough away from today to dream, but close enough to still feel a sense of purpose around our activities, both free and constrained enough for the full-time dreamer. And why should we spend more time in the future? Why dream? Dreaming at its core is a creative exercise. It puts wrinkles on the brain. It gets to the root of motivation. It expands the limits of creativity, bolsters capacity, and drives action. Spending time in the future is a fantastic way of thinking without the constraint of the present, relieving pressures of immediacy, understanding what gives hope in a time beyond the current, creating a path towards enacting change through that hope. Ultimately, if we can spend more time in the future with enough creative ideas, we are able to be present for them as they arise. Something I think we all desperately need. More practically, to be more present by being in the future is about improving two aspects of our lives: our agency and our optimism. Some of the best definitions of what agency and optimism are come from the Institute for the Future and their Futures Foursquare model. They use two questions. How much do you think you have the ability to do something about a future, which is agency? And how positive are you about that future changing? That's optimism. The more you purposefully dream about the future, the more you can increase both aspects. Research on future time perception and motivation uses a similar framework of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, external or internal task orientation, and how positively the future is viewed. Optimal motivation and task orientation are to be intrinsically motivated and internally task-oriented. But that's only part of it. We're not always at our best, or some of us, our best is limited. Some of us feel a complete lack of agency and are pessimistic. And guess what? We can still dream about the future. Dreaming meets us where we are. We'll even see examples in upcoming episodes where the lower our initial agency and optimism are, the more motivated an individual is to dream about and positively change the future. Some of us are on the other end, fully agent and optimistic. Well, our dreaming looks a little different. Dreaming with a purpose for these moments requires a gut check. I admit that I tend to vacillate between the extremes of agency and optimism, but I am most present when I have balance of both. Kind of like where I am now with this project. We'll explore other perspectives in future episodes. In the meantime, we're going to get into what dreaming with a purpose is and is not. Do dreams have limitations? Well, of course they do. One in particular is that dreams in our context are to be attainable if even a little bit so. And I'm not talking about has to be 100% attainable. I'm not talking about even 50% attainable. But if you can dream of a future where something is even remotely attainable, that is a future that we want to dream about. Dreams are also not utopian. There isn't even one dream for the future, because dreams are not predictions. They are a series of dreams that form a framework of how things might be. When we get into creativity and capacity, we'll talk about this further. Dreaming with a purpose is not dissociative. Contemporary narrative talks a lot about being present. This is not dreaming with a purpose, because purpose requires action, and it cannot remove us so far from action that we render ourselves null. Dreaming does require the contemplation that stems from these activities, such as mindfulness, meditation, prayer, self-actualization, or any other term to describe moving oneself from a thought, desire, action in order to achieve presence. But they are not actively engaged enough on their own to be dreaming with purpose. This absence of activity will not only not make positive change in our world, depending on your future orientation, this could induce complacency. At the same time, we're told not to spend so much time dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. Daydreaming is also considered a wasteful activity. But how do you be present to create change if you can't think about the past or the future? What's wrong with getting creative with daydreaming? Nothing. Just ask anyone who has had a brilliant shower thought, or came up with an idea while on a leisurely stroll. The British chemist Douglas H. Everett once said, "There are some people who live in a dream world, and there are some who face reality. Then there are those who turn one into the other." But there's so much more to it. Throughout this series, we will dive into what researchers in the fields of ethnography, design, psychology, and of course, futures thinking have to say about our ability, need, even our instinct to dream about the future. For example, in psychological theory, if you've ever studied history, congratulations, you have also thought about the future, because futures thinking and studying history are parallel practices, and the way you develop one relates to how you develop the other. Trauma after major global events can motivate thinking about the future differently depending on a number of factors. And these are some of the things that we will get into this season. And doing so will help us develop our dreaming with a purpose. Remember when I said that to be more present, you need to spend more time in the future? What do we do to exercise to actually make this happen? I've already talked about increasing agency and optimism from a higher level, but what are some of the more tangible factors to work on? Throughout my conversations and research, 4 themes seem to have emerged. Themes around motivation, our creativity, our capacity, and our activity. First, let's talk about motivation. Futures thinking is about making positive change, and to make those changes requires motivation. Motivation can come from anywhere, and we're all motivated and understand the future slightly differently depending on a few factors. In the previously mentioned study on future time perception and motivation, we have 2 dimensions of motivation: how much utility we find in current tasks towards future goals, and how we are motivated, whether that's intrinsically or extrinsically, internally or externally. We'll get into these in further detail in future episodes. One more specific motivation that has come up in every conversation I've had for this project so far is community. Community seems to be the word on the tip of everyone's tongues right now, and we're going to explore that. Particularly of interest to me is how people define it and what it means for motivation. In some ways, you have to define your community in order to understand your motivation. And since futures are about making the greatest impact, taking a few minutes to answer a question like, how do I define community? Will start you off on a purposeful path of dreaming. We will explore that in a future episode, and the results may surprise you. Our next exercise is creativity. Miss Nina Simone once said, "You can't help it. An artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times." Miss Simone has a point, and I think her version of the times probably includes not just present reality, but the dreamed for future. If you've ever listened to any of her songs, you'll know what I'm talking about. And that requires increasing our ability to be creative. Some of us are best equipped to understand the present. Not just take it for what it is, but drill into it. Connect seemingly unconnected dots. Combine understanding in unique ways that may not be apparent to everyone. That is certainly a gift, but it is also a skill to develop. Some of us have been given the ability to spot those signals for those who can go off on tangents with them, and that is a talent too. Raising my hand in guilt there. They both bring a unique approach to the same available information. But I'm not a creative, you say. Many of us have had that drilled into our heads since we were told to put down the finger paints. Reclaiming our rightful place as creative beings is essential to dreaming bigger. Creativity is a skill we can all learn and develop that is important for us to think bigger than our default, empathize in ways we've never given ourselves permission to, and to get into a state of mind that feels free to make our mistakes as big as it takes. The brilliant psychologist Mikhaly Csikszentmihalyi coined the term flow in 1975 to describe a state in which we get a feeling of energized focus, full involvement, and enjoyment in the process of the activity. Improving our flow, discovering our purpose and purposelessness while playing at work or just aimlessly wandering are all activities we will discover in future episodes that drive our need to get more creative about dreaming with purpose. We get into the beauty of different perspectives through the comparison of legendary rap artists, creativity and winemaking born from history, and many more examples of creating the future. Capacity is how much of what we have and how we use it to think about the future. It is in some ways another dimension to motivation or creativity. It is the accelerator to drive us faster or slower in the wrong direction or the right direction, depending on the health of our system to provide capacity. Building capacity addresses things like biases, empathy, cause and effect, root cause identification, and orientation towards construction rather than destruction. When talking about capacity, we'll spend time grappling with using capacity and what it means to question the intuitive, use the counterintuitive, subvert with contravention, surprise with provocation, and evolve for revolution. Building capacity isn't just about your own. We'll also talk about it being about systemic change. Taking a look at what support systems for the future you will need to begin to work towards today. This requires a long-range perspective and time to have it. Building capacity is just that, understanding there is no normal in our systems, and we are free to build systems from where we are at. Some of us have the capacity to give time or money to create our futures. Others can draw, while others make the canvas to draw on. The leadership scholar Warren Bennis is quoted as saying, "There are two ways of being creative. One can sing and dance, or one can create an environment in which singers and dancers flourish." This is all about finding your way to building capacity. Building capacity must also be sustainable. We're creating systemic changes knowing there is no burn it all down and start over again option. We're not drilling an atomic bomb to the center of the earth to blow it up or destroying everything just to build a rocket ship to another planet. It must also be personally sustainable. We're human and need to understand and respect limits from ourselves and others. Whatever that looks like for you, you need to recharge. If our fuel tanks are empty, we can't dream. The less sustainable we are for ourselves, the less sustainable the overall system is, and the future cannot be created with the capacity in mind. When dreaming so far into the future, it's not always easy, apparent, and definitely not immediate to see the result of our actions. But action is required to get started. Some of us will be in a position for urgent action when we dream. Most of the time, that is not the case. Remember, dreaming with a purpose is spending time in the future. You will spend so much time in the future that being present to make the actions within the realm of future seems much more feasible. Remember, we have different approaches and motivations, so discover what you have and use it. We start from different perspectives, so use them. We have different capabilities, so just get started. The perfect is the enemy of the good. We also have just as much trouble empathizing with our future selves as others. Wait, what? It's true, in futures thinking we will learn that our future selves are so much a stranger to our current selves that we're actually someone we don't know. So you need to learn how to empathize with that person as if you would empathize with someone you don't even know. A perfect stranger, which also means it's a perfect stranger with possibilities. Great dreaming with purpose creates systemic and seismic shifts. It's not incrementalism per se, but it recognizes that big ideas take time to implement. And it takes awareness that most immediacy comes from systemic and institutional thinking forced upon us. The renowned activist Ashtin Berry once said on the Natural Disasters podcast,
immediacy is a byproduct of capitalism, and so we force our minds to come to immediate conclusions because we've been told we don't have enough time.
And I've been quoting the shit out of that ever since. The context for her statement was a reaction to an email in a professional context where things may get heated and how we shouldn't immediately react. But there is so much truth to that statement that drives much about how I think about action in the context of the future these days. To circle back to our first theme on motivation, removing the immediacy out of action means you can begin to acknowledge the other from a place of respect rather than a gut reaction. It allows you to do a gut check on yourself. Is this coming from a place of privilege? Have I properly tuned my ears to empathy? It allows for us to reduce misinterpretations and to hear out other people when there are misinterpretations. Because let's face it, we're not great communicators and definitely not as great as we think we are. We'll also explore where there are times where urgent action is actually needed. And our ability to act so urgently is because we have spent so much time in the future that our present selves are able to act so urgently. As I'm recording this, we are in one of those times where urgent action has been necessary. I would be remiss in not acknowledging that at this point in the Full-Time Dreamer project, when I'm starting and launching it, we're in the midst of a global pandemic with COVID-19, on the potential verge of a global recession due to the economic fallout, and during a time of racial injustice, especially here in the United States, and I'm sure is being felt all around the world. Right now, Black and Latinx communities are systematically at a disadvantage and affected not just by these situations, but just by existing. Since the beginning of this pandemic, Black and Latinx men and women have been more likely to die from the virus, lose their jobs, their housing, and are struggling to find their next meals at rates greater than non-Black, Indigenous, and people of color peers. They are incarcerated at higher rates in already overcrowded prisons that are spreading this disease quicker and deadlier. They're being deported, locked out of countries, their children locked up and treated like animals because they've been separated from their parents with little to no hope of being reconnected, at least in the short term. the eruption of protest in the middle of preparing these episodes against the racial injustices for the killing of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. And those are just the ones that are on the tips of my tongue. And hundreds of others this year have caused us to come together in some ways as a society to urgently act and understand that the system can't continue the way it is. The leaders that have been thinking so much about this future for so long have been stepping up and leading those of us who are at a very different place, and I thank them for that. And in the middle of this project, it's these circumstances that makes me acknowledge that it may be hard or even close to impossible for many of the people they're leading to think about the future, let alone dream with a purpose. Me even being able to think about doing this project, and to an extent, those who are able to take the time to talk with me for it, do so from a great place of privilege. We are in a time of reaction, but I would love to be able to help everyone to also take this as a time of reflection and preparation for building the future. I know several people who are at their wits' ends with all of this, who would love to spend time dreaming with me, and it's just not possible. They are people of color dealing with racism, healthcare workers of all stripes putting their lives on the line, social justice advocates fighting for what they believe in, and people are just trying to keep their families fed, a roof over their heads, taking care of elderly friends and neighbors, running businesses and trying to keep them afloat. These are the voices that would add a sense of urgency to these conversations. But alas, all I can do is acknowledge them at this point. When they come up for air, I don't want to take that first breath from them. I want to give them a tank of oxygen so that they can get strength. I've highlighted some thoughts from some Black, Indigenous, and people of color because they've been silenced for long enough. I'll continue to do so throughout this series. The more diverse we make our resources, the bigger we can dream about the future because it includes perspectives that are not ours. Something we'll talk more about in future episodes, for sure. If you are unsure what to do, where to start, or even overwhelmed by the flood of information, there is a silver lining. Of the people I've spoke with so far in this project, few were less optimistic and felt they had little they can do about it. Even those who were the least optimistic or had any thought that they can do anything about something, maybe even especially those, were able to find some improvements in the futures we discussed. You just have to take that first step. And taking that first step will require us to spend some more time understanding what that future will look like, not just for ourselves, but for everybody. I spent a lot of time talking about individuals, but I did mention that there is also systemic changes that we will all be affecting here. By dreaming with purpose, by spending more time in the future, understanding where we can go and the possibilities, we can act more in the present and create the future that we want to create. Thank you for dreaming with us today on the Full-Time Dreamer Project. If you want to spend more time dreaming together, you can contact me via the website, thefulltimedreamer.com. There you can learn more about the project, about some of my other work, and maybe get on the podcast yourself, or just set up some time to dream. If you're interested in sharing a dream with me but don't have time to schedule a meeting, I set up a hotline at 732-455-2425. Leave a message and tell me what you're feeling hopeful about. Please share with friends. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and SoundCloud. If you can, spend money with those I've mentioned today. Please show them the same love you've showed me. Till next time, I'm Michael Valania. This is the Full-Time Dreamer Project, dream purposefully.